Patricia. Okay, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the country you're in. And I would like to thank Viviana Centeno, Dr. Centeno, Dr. Brito, to everyone that's part of HPV, Francisco Herrera, well, everyone. I would like to thank the consideration you have of inviting me to be part of this event that you are carrying out from the first International Symposium of Regression Therapy. I don't believe in chances. That's why I'm here. It's not a chance. It's a road that I've taken. Thank you for the award you gave me last year. And I also want to thank a particular person, and that is my teacher. My teacher, Dr. Kaboli, to whom I would like to thank that he appeared in my life in this incarnation and taught me what he taught me. So, thanks to the universe. And let's begin. The topic is, as you can see, evidence is the topic of my presentation. Is there life after death? And I don't believe this anymore. At this point, I don't believe it because I don't need to believe it. I already know. But when I say to this point, I mean the road that I've been going through now. I remember Facundo Cabral as a singer and a poet from Argentina. When he was asked once about human being, he answered, human being, it's a weird being. He doesn't ask to be born, he doesn't know how to live, and he doesn't want to die. It was the 60s when he was a teenager. When I was a teenager, somebody told me, human being has body and soul. Human being is born, grows, multiplies, and dies. And effectively, well, this presentation does not have slides. Yes, it doesn't. Because more than a presentation with slides, what I want to do is to reflect, make a reflection out loud. So as I was saying, they told me this, the human being is born, grows, reproduces, and dies. And they told me that it had a body and soul. It was in the 80s when I entered medicine field, and there was a concept that came with me from the faculty, is that death is the failure of medicine. I started the profession and the exercise and the practice as a doctor. And I was 4 years in the beginning with, and then the emergency room. And I saw the human being being born, and I helped him be born. The following 25 years, I saw the man die. And when you pay a little more attention to the moment of death, you realize that sometimes weird things happen. I have an uncountable number of anecdotes, reactions, and attitudes that human beings have when they are about to die. So I would just call them weird things. This makes me, in the beginning of my profession, that makes me belong to a group of people with an see to believe attitude. And this leads us to an immediate consequence that we need to wait until science demonstrates this. But when we start seeing these weird things in many episodes of death is when you change. When I changed my group and I started with the group in which I am now, which is the group of people that have decided to believe in order to see. I think there's something weird. Someone that is about to die is saying, I'm seeing my mother with an unbelievable peace. Or my dad is here waiting. So if I believe that, well, it turns out that I'm going to the group of seeing to believing, and this makes me move, makes me look for things, and the one who seeks is condemned to find. And what do you find when you seek? You can find anything, but there is something that it's immediate. You're going to find with her and that evidence. And when you find that evidence, even if science cannot prove it, evidence leads you to knowledge. It transmits you knowledge. Even though science in this moment cannot demonstrate the evidence, this is something that throughout history has been kept the same. Evidence is always in front of science. Well, with this knowledge, when I reflect on the moment of death in the human being, I realize I have two protagonists. One is the body and the other in soul. Well, I was told in my teenage years that I had body and soul. What happens with the body? Because the body dies. And with it, the conscious dies. And because who leads our body is the consciousness. And it doesn't lead us not from our birth, but from 7 years on. When the patient dies, the conscious dies with him. There's no consciousness anymore. But there's another protagonist. The other one is the soul. And the soul, I was seeing yesterday when Raymond Moody was presenting, he's a really close friend of mine. I could see how he was named as the pioneer of the investigation study of the consciousness when you survive death. We're not talking about this. We're talking about that soul is consciousness, and the soul comes from the translation of psyche, that in Greek means soul, and it means mind. One thing is the mind, and the other is the brain. I think that when the body dies, the brain dies, the consciousness dies. The consciousness survives, that is not in the soul. The soul survives. The mind survives, that is not in the brain. On this perspective, I started seeing if there was a mechanism in which I could make contact with the soul in order to ask it, what does the process of dying consist of? In the first road I found it in the regressive therapy. That's why I'm thankful that Dr. Kabuli appeared in my life to teach me this, to teach me about this therapy. And logically, part of the regressive therapy is what is called the PLT. It was Maureen Netherton in the 70s, the first one that named this as PLT, and the first one to affirm that in order to do this therapy, hypnosis is not necessary. For me, is one of the most interesting parts of the regressive therapy. And it's one of the most interesting parts because it's where the human being relives the death of a past life. As we all know, that when a patient is reliving a past life, we're not going to finish the session until he relives the death of that past life. And what brings this is knowledge on the process of death. We all know, those who have been lucky to be joining a patient with the PLT, we all know what happens there. Because before, I want to clarify something. What we call regression therapy, that in reality, we could call it transpersonal psychology. That is the proof. Allen and Groff in the 1960s realized that this existed. Those who discovered it, and he named it transpersonal psychology. And I say that he realized this because, and not discovered it, because if we went to the origin, which we would have to go to Pythagoras. But as I said, this is not the topic of this.
And in the regression therapy, and yeah, when they say regression, you go back. But how can you go back to the past if past doesn't exist? The past existed, but it wasn't present. But the past doesn't exist. Only the present exists. But that doesn't also exist. There's actually humans that go existing and really regretting life and grieving it with all their energy, with all their force. Because it's all about being what we came here to do and doing what we came here to do, because we're not here as a coincidence. We've come here to do something. We've even chosen what we were going to do. We have to put all of our effort, our intention in doing this. So, there's only the present. What's happening? What happens is that we've talked about this in these 3 last days, that there's this inconclusive experiences, and those experiences, there's a lot of emotional disturbances. Those emotional disturbances that are not solved are in the soul. Because when the past was present, this was produced. It produced this situation, the experience that was inconcluded, and the emotional disturbances were just left there. And then later on, the body died. All these emotional disturbances were still left in the soul. And now the soul is here, now, in this body. So what happens with this? If they are there, it doesn't matter. But if they are in this body, and we have evidence that are similar to what the origin had, we all know that they will activate. And the point of activating, when they are going to begin influencing only over our body and over our psyche. So we're going to say that, yeah, I might say I have this or I might have that. I have a phobia that I don't know where it comes from. And the doctor will look at you, he will study you, and he'll say, yours, it doesn't have origin, it doesn't have any organic origin, but you'll still keep seeing. Is that what yours is psychosomatic? And we all know that, right? Psycho. It means that the origin of what's going on is in the soul. And this is important. It's important because this is very important in therapy. Since I want to talk about the topic of death, I've been saying that in a past life, you're not going to finish the session until the patient doesn't relive the moment of death. And what happens when the patient relives that experience of death? What happens? What happens is that when they're reliving death, the first thing the patient will tell you is, or will manifest, is that he'll see his own body. And then, as a therapist accompanying, the only thing that you will say, okay, fine, keep going, fine. He might say that they'll see a light. And starting from him or her seeing the light, it's when all these patients show that part of the difficulty of having the patient to find the correct words to express in a logical and reasonable way, and to be able to transmit to us, to the therapist, how it is, that place where they are, what they feel in that place where they are, and what are they seeing and feeling. Well, in my case, it's many times where I've asked again, and then what about that light? Because you're saying you're seeing a light. Who's saying it? Are they Islamic or Christian patients saying it? No, everybody. Everybody's saying it. I'm seeing my body, I'm seeing a light. They say it 100% of the patients. And it doesn't matter. The religious belief, that does not matter. When you talk about the light, that's when you have, that experience. And then when you ask them, what is the light? Can you detail? Is there an object? Are you able to talk about it, about what's going on? There's something happens in everybody, and it coincides with everybody, is that when they tell you, look, what I can tell you is that love and peace that I feel in this place, I've never felt. Again, I repeat, the 100%. We are a lot of thousands in patients that I've seen in these years, and all the therapists that I've read, all of the patients have talked about this light, even whatever their religious belief might be, their their socioeconomic level, doesn't matter. So, what about death? Death, which is what we so much fear, death is our partner, our life partner. Our life partner from the moment of birth. Oh, yes. From the moment of birth and from the moment of conception, we start to grow. But we grew alongside our partner, and that partner that comes close is fear. Well, death comes with us from conception, and we don't ever want to know about them. And fear comes also with us. Along the road, we start seeing that the best way of treating death is with knowledge. In other words, I acquire knowledge, automatically fear disappears. And this is important. It's as important that death. I mean, you're saying that if I am fearful of death because I don't know its process. Sometimes you say I'm scared, and I'm even scared of talking about it. That's the mistake we make. That's the mistake we make. But look at this one thing. The patient that revives the life experience,
death of a past life, tells us the things that we mentioned. I see the light, I see my body. But what does the patient say to you that has a near-death experience? He tells you that I've been seeing my body. When I was being resuscitated, I saw a light. He is unwilling to tell you details, and he says that where I was, I felt love and peace as I never felt before. They tell you the same thing. The patient that has had a near-death experience tells you the same that the patient that has not had near-death experience would have relived their death in this past life. Exactly the same. So there's two ways in which we've reached to the soul, which is the other protagonist of the death, as we had mentioned in the beginning, and we're finding answers. But there's another way. Of course, there's another way. That way is the way of human being, which is when he's in front of death, when he's facing death. I have a patient that in the moment of his death, he says, the death is not this. Death is simply that I'm going away from my body for a being of light that is waiting for me. He even said, he helped me yesterday and I left the body. I could see my body from outside, and it took me to the place where I was going to go when my body is finished. What's that? What does that tell you? He's telling you the same. It can't be that so many people that do not know each other have the capacity of creating the same story. It can't be. I mentioned before that there's thousands of patients that I've seen in PLT, but if we go to the studies of various authors and we see the cases of near-death experience, we're talking about millions of people. And in the works of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she referenced to all these manifestations that the person that's dying to us. That's what I was mentioning in the beginning. I don't need to believe anymore that after death we come back, because I already know. On that part, the patients that have relived their past life's death, and on the other hand, with the patients that I've seen and I keep seeing that have near-death experiences, it you just gotta look in their eyes and you realize that they're telling the truth, their truth, and that is something that no one can take away. That's why they're really cautious in the moment of talking. They don't trust just anybody. I think among the many qualities that the human develops after having a near-death experience, one of them is, like, using this is common. They see you and observe you, and they know that if you are someone they can tell their story. They develop a sixth sense, because not all people are adequate, appropriate. And there's another way there. That in this symposium, it has been treated in a really beautiful way, and it's the existence of reincarnated souls. We all know that to be in a regressive state, or that in a person is in a regressive state, he achieves that because he reaches a expanded conscious mode. What is this? It's a capacity, a natural capacity that all human beings have, that spontaneously, when you connect with an emotion, a feeling, or a symptom whose origin we don't know, we are able, through this capacity, of being present, of being there, present, in the present, of experiences in the moment before. We cannot be in multiple presences and reliving within the current paradigm of time-space. But when a human being is in regression and we see it's an expanded consciousness state, it could be or it could not be. It could be that in that moment, that capacity allows him to answer with beings that already have passed. This capacity allows us to, as we have mentioned throughout these days, one of the ways is to ask the voice and throat and lend them to that being in order to be able to speak with them. There we have another source of information. We're talking directly with the soul that does not have a body anymore. And we're going to help it. So it can go to the light. There's no protocol of what I have to say. No, you just have to say what you need to say in a moment. What I tell my students when I do trainings it's about selling them the light. You have to convince them. And for that, you need to use 4 weapons. And the 4 weapons you need to use is understanding, compassion, patience, and love. And you cannot simulate this. Because if you simulate it, the being notices. Because as I was saying before, Dr. Bistrich, the vibrating fields of the therapist and the patients are interconnected. And if I'm pretending to feel something that I don't feel, that being is going to feel it. He's going to feel that I don't feel it. And it's going to feel as like someone's trying to fool him. He's going to feel distrust towards me. But what it is true, the great information that we get from what we call lost souls is, well, when they stop being lost and they go to the light, through this, the information they transmit to us is really valuable. That is why we are the most benefited therapists, because joining in their experience the soul of a human being, for me, it's without talking about religion, I consider something sacred because it's really big. It gives you like you learn a lot, and it, even though that death exists, it tells you that it's not the end. It only exists for the body, and that confirms it too. Some of them have going through life and they don't even realize that they lost their body.
And but there are things that they have them stuck here. It's hard to explain. And others haven't decided to leave, and that's another thing. We don't allow them. But the important thing of this is that we have here the plain clarity. So with all my years as a therapist, I have had 2 situations. The first, when I noticed both protagonists that we have in love, I noticed that what the answer I needed was in the soul. And that's what the title of my first book is. And when I noticed that my regressions weren't really regressions, as I said before, and that's why I called it the eternal present of the soul. Sometimes you have a patient go into the office and they say, I want to ask you something. Is there a possibility that if I want to relive a past life, I can stay trapped in it? And I said, no, right? What happens is that the patient has to be very constant, and very conscious. And conscious in the way that it is that you're observing what's going on and listening. And when the soul teaches you that inconclusive experience that you have to have in order to resolve, because it's being taught from their eternal present, because it's with them, our own conscious can transfer through time and space. And they say, well, but it's just an appreciation of our conscious, the experience without that inconclusive observation is here in the eternal present. And well, I would like to comment, share more that I don't agree with Facundo Jara. Yeah, because in this therapy, far from what we can solve, that we can already, we've seen the different works that we're doing within that, that's already important. The patient always goes to the doctor. That we have to give him the power. So, what happens and what's most important to me in these therapy? For me, the most important therapy is what the human discovers that this therapy can do, that when they submit themselves to this therapy, as I like to say, the most important thing is to what they discover. And what they discover, fundamentally, four things. They discover they're a light being or a spiritual being. They are incarnated in the physical body. It's an experience that they've chosen. Secondly, and the other thing is that they have the ability to love. And what they also discover is that they have an infinite ability to forgive. And fourth is that that the death is not the end. Once we lose the body, we are still alive. We go back to where we came from. So that's why I said that I don't agree with Facundo Jara. Yeah, humans, after what I think I can say is human being is a human light being. They're not a stranger, they're a light being. What they decide to do, and when they don't fear death, they learn to live. Because there's so many people that have been dying 20, 30 years, when in reality, we're only going to die one day and at one moment. The other days, we're not dying. So we have to be here in the present and tell you all that that we haven't come here to suffer. That's what we've come here to learn. What happens is that the life experiences we have can be as horrible as we want them to be. Or we can suffer as much as we want. But when you notice that this is not coincidence, that if they are there, it's because of something, and that in reality, they are just experiences that we've come to learn. Do you notice that we've come to evolve, to be happy? Because the secret to all this is to do two things. Nothing else and more than two things: love and forgive. But starting from yourself. Because if you don't love or forgive yourself, how are you going to be able to do it to somebody else? That's what we have to understand. Thank you. you have given us, Doctor.
Patricia, ¿me escuchas?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Sí, sí,
Yes.
perfectamente.
Perfectly. I wanted to thank you for this very great reflection that you've given us today.
Gracias a vosotros.
Thank you to you all. And I wanted to take the moment and with all that wisdom so that you could leave a message to all these souls that we've had, that sometimes that I think it's too late. Sometimes I think it's too late to fight for their happiness. What could they say? I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first part of the question. What can I say to these souls that are what? That have lost the hope, that have lost hope. They feel trapped in fear.
Bueno,
They feel like it's too late to keep, fighting.
nunca es tarde
It's
para
never
nada.
It's never too late.
Yo les puedo decir
I
que
can
nunca
tell
es
you that
tarde
it's
para
never
nada.
too late for anything.
Alguien a mí me
Somebody
explicó,
explained to me,
alguien
somebody
me dijo,
once told me,
cuando
when
llega el momento de la muerte,
you
en el
get to
último
the
instante,
point of death,
se arrepiente de todo,
if at one
pide
point
perdón.
they regret everything and say
La
sorry,
experiencia quedó bien.
the experience was okay.
Entonces, el que tiene miedo,
So those that
que
fear
busque el
it
conocimiento.
find wisdom.
El que tenga miedo, que
Those that
busque el
are fearful
conocimiento.
find
El conocimiento lo va a sacar del
knowledge.
miedo, lo va a
Knowledge
rescatar del miedo.
will save you from fear.
Y si se siente
And if you
atrapado,
feel
se siente
trapped, you
sin
feel
esperanza,
hopeless,
que mire en su interior.
look inside.
Que mire en su interior,
Look
porque
inside
todos
because
tenemos
we all
en
have
nuestro interior
in
una
our
luz.
insides a
Algunas
light.
pequeñita, otras más
Some
grandes.
small, some
Pero si la
others are bigger,
localizas,
but if you find
la
it,
puedes localizar
and you
porque
can
puede
find it
estar ahí.
because it's there,
Y te quedas fijamente
and you
mirándola.
just look at it and
Vas a ver
look at it,
sorpresivamente para ti cómo se
you'll
va
see how
haciendo,
surprising it gets
cómo va
bigger
aumentando
and
de
bigger
tamaño esta
and bigger in
expansión
size. It's growing,
de luz.
that light,
Es
because
presencia, es
that's
que
that
realmente
presence. That's who you really
eres
are.
un ser de
You
luz.
are a light being.
Y en último lugar,
And
pues si te sientes así, ponte delante de un
Well,
espejo.
if you
just
feel like that,
Y
put yourself in front of the
cuando tengas
mirror.
delante de ti
And when you're in front of yourself,
a esa persona, a esa mujer, a
or
ese hombre,
to this
que
woman
quizá
or person that maybe
sorpresivamente ya ni te acordarás de
surprisingly you didn't
o de
even
ella,
remember,
mírale a los ojos.
look at her in the
Y
eye.
cuando conectes con su
And when
mirada,
you connect with that,
y
with their
solamente cuando
sight,
conectes con su mirada, dile, yo
and
te amo,
only then
yo te
tell
bendigo,
him,
yo
I
te quiero.
love you, I forgive you,
Lo
I
repites
bless
3
you.
veces.
And you
Durante
repeat it 3
unos
times.
pocos de días. ¿Sí? Un día vas a notar
One day you're gonna
que
notice
eso te
that
sale
this
del
heals you.
corazón.
That
Lo
heals your
verbalizas por
soul.
la boca.
And you
En
verbalize
ese
it
momento
from the
ya
mouth. And in that
estás
moment,
preparado para
you are
poder,
prepared to
ejercer el amor y el perdón
to
hacia los demás.
give
Pero tienes
love
que
and
empezar,
forgiveness to
empezar por
other,
ti.
but you
¿Sí?
need to start with
Y
yourself.
nadie lo puede hacer por
And
ti.
no one can do it for
Porque
you
eres un ser de luz, tienes
because
el
you
poder.
are a being
Lo que
of
pasa es que
life.
se nos
You
olvida
have the
cuando
power,
llegamos
but
aquí.
we forgot when we get here. Beautiful doctor. There are many messages thanking you. I would like to invite you in a few moments. We're going to start the round table so we
Sí, sí.
can share
Por supuesto,
our
ya está. Pero hay
views.
una pregunta que pasó y medio la leí
There
en
was a
inglés.
question
A
that
ver
I
si la
read,
a ver si la localizas tú.
sometimes localization.
Hay una pregunta que decía qué hacer con los que se quedan o algo así.
It was a question about what to do with the people who stays. What message would you give to the people who think they will not find you will not
Pues le
reunite with the
diría
people who
un
left
mensaje,
this planet? Well, I would give
el mensaje es
them
un poquito largo.
uh,
Ya,
maybe a little long
ya depende
message.
del
Well, it
conocimiento de cada
depends
uno.
on the
Yo les
knowledge
diría,
of
lo
each of
primero que
us.
le dejen
The
marchar.
first thing I
Por
would
favor, que les dejen marchar.
I would say is to let them go.
Hay personas, y esto lo he visto en la
There are people
consulta, que
that I've seen in the
cuando su
office that
familiar
when their
se está preparando para irse a la
relatives
luz,
is
¿no?
preparing to
Ya,
go to the
fin,
light, like
como yo
finally,
veré, como yo digo,
as when I get to sell them light, I realize the patients start crying, and I ask them, "Why are you crying?" Because if he leaves me. No, I want to tell you something. You don't lose them, you win them. Because as we have mentioned here, when the lost soul is there with you in your vibrational field, and when it's here, it's damaging you, even if their intention is to take care of you and protect you. They can protect you. They can't protect you. They're weak. And what do? They consume your energy. So they're not making you any favors. So I would tell them this. First, let them go. And later, what happens? Well, in the moment they leave, I tell them the same. I need you to be 30 days. Well, actually 33. And I laugh because maybe you're thinking, where did you get this from? Well, they told me. 33 days without thinking about your dad or your son or whoever, whatever being left. But that is impossible, they tell me. And I tell them, yes, it is possible. How to do it? Well, don't fight against this thought. Let it arrive. Let it come. See, when it goes to you, just say, thank you, God, because my dad is already in the light. And the thought will keep floating. And you do this every time this thought comes back. And after the 33 days, you can call it, and then you can recover your strength. And starting there, on the 34th day, you're gonna, even if you think of them, you will not have it in your vibrational field, and then it's going to help you. Wonderful, doctor. We thank you, and we invite you to participate in the round table in a few moments. It will be a pleasure to be in the round table with such wonderful participants. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.